Hey folks, Sam Edwards here, FX PhD 213, Class 6, and I think you'll probably recognize where we left off from our last class. Hope you're still with me. I know here's at Class 4, and there's this balcony that's now in our shot. So let's just jump right in to this class. We're going to talk about lighting and shading on this balcony that we made. And here it is. We'll go to a frame where we can see a little more of it. And we'll jump right in. Well, if we want it to be shaded, the first thing we're going to need to do is go to the node bin and we'll go to the schematic view and we'll just pull a light into our scene, F4. And that's the result. If we move this light up a little bit, I notice that, and you can see this light right here moving, right? We can just kind of pull it over here into our scene. I notice that our ground turns black. I think the problem with it is that it's facing the wrong way. So if we flip it over, go to -90 and face it up, it's looking a little bit more the way we'd want it to look, right? So Let's just do that. And then this light, to get this surface better matching our cast shadows, if it's back in more or less the same position as this light, I think we'll get a better match. So easiest way to do that is probably go to the top view, Shift 4, and pick up this light and just move it back here next to this one. Look at F4. Right? And everything's matching a little better. And that feels a little bit more like the light in our scene and in our matte painting, somewhere between where our matte painting is and our scene is. So that's great. This shadow caster, back to that just a little bit, F4. I want to see if we can get a little more softness. You get a little leaking around the edges of objects. I don't know why, but you can jam it up just a little bit and make it a little softer, which I think looks good. There's also how big the map is. Sometimes you don't need a 1024 shadow map. You could just have like a 256 or a 512. And when the softness is way up, you can't really tell. So here with a 512, we're able to jam it up to 9 before we get any of those leaky edges. Why don't we leave it here at 10, right? And we can see if 1024 is better. Those large shadow maps really, really slow things down. So great, I feel like the lighting is better, but I think that we can also get a little more shading on our objects if we select our cube and play with its shine. And I almost always just type in a 1. There's this funny thing with shine where 0 is no shine, and then 1 is the most shine, and then it trails off again down to 100. And I pretty much use 1 or 2 always. It doesn't seem to do very much beyond 3, doesn't look bad. And just so it matches, we could grab this surface right here, our ground, see what maybe a 5 looks like on it. Still too much shine. Oh, look at that. You get a nice like line of shine, but the shadows don't take it out because of the position of our light. So I would say say 10. And we'll just duplicate this multiply node right here and drop the blurred version of the AO on there, and watch this. It just gives it a little bit more kind of grunge in the corners. And then maybe even this one doesn't have to be quite so dark, right? We can just give it a little transparency. And it's kind of has its little render artifacts that we don't mind getting rid of. And you can see that that AO will look right here in our, ain't hurting us one bit, as is our, our shadow on our scene. And looking deeper into our comp, I think you see things are, well, we'll adjust our lighting as needed. But the AO is always I think a the Z depth. Well, it isn't all it could be. The Z depth in flame is controlled from the camera. So we might have to select our camera, our tracked camera for this scene, and change its far. Let's look at like, instead of 100,000, just 10,000. Right? You can see I've been practicing. Now, you can't set it so far that it clips off the edge, because look at the rest of these passes then. We start losing our corner there, right? So we'll just ease it back until the corner's in. Right? And even check it a little earlier up. We're losing this corner also, right? Zing, pull it up. But that ought to hold it in for the whole length of the shot. So back to our outputs, looking at our Z depth. Well, it's definitely brighter there, right? use Z depth, right? Now, since we don't have any blur in yet, you don't see it, but we can try like a 20. And remembering our background, this would be a good time to get a compare going with context 2. If we can find it, it's always vexing. Right here, the first thing we see has to be out of focus, right? So we can just grab the focus plane and look at this great UI. See, there's a yellow line, a red line, and a blue line. And when you grab this UI, it shows you like center of focus and then fall off to the front and fall off to the back. We can just make everything out of focus. Notice everything out of focus means this is like pixel sharp, but as soon as the red line goes past it, then there's some defocus on that. We can even go closer here if we wanted, right? Boom. So a little bit out of focus, a lot out of focus. And I was noticing in this defocus mode that you get kind of a sharp edge around your outsides and that it doesn't comp very well, right? And I've tried toggling the pre-multiplication and all that. I didn't think it was great, right? And I think it should be pre-multiplied when it comes out. I did notice, and this was like, watch your render time go crazy, is that in 3D Blur, if you use the modulated and wait for it, this seems to be incredibly slow on the Mac. You get a nice kind of bloomy out of focus over here that, oh, you know what? And this is the other thing that I do a lot. We need to comp using the blurred matte, right? So F4 to see the result of this comping, right? And then you get great blur on that edge. And we can just try, right? And since we have our context 2 set up as our compare buffer, as they call it, we can just check all 3 channels while we're at it. So Shift R, zoom in. Looks a little heavy there, right? Looks a little heavy in the red. better. And maybe don't make it fade out into the blacks. I like it to fade out into the whites, but not into the black. Let's say that's better for red. Maybe not done, but Shift G for green. Not a hell of a lot of grain in this, I guess, Alexa footage, right? I mean, yeah, you can see it gets a little broken up through that, but I'm just going to attenuate that. And I just always like less grain in my green in my Alexa footage. Sort of a mouthful. A little less, but you know, that little breakup is similar now, I think. Shift B for the blue channel. Looks a little harsh, right? And look how high it put it up there. So probably around where the red is. Just using my guess. More in the shadows. Breakup looks similar, I guess, now, right? And Shift Z to get back into color. You know, that's looking more like our Alexa footage. Okay, so now we've kind of really done a better job of comping our porch and making 3D out of it in action. And I want to show you one last trick for the day that I think you're going to find really useful. If you right-click on this regrain node, you can create a batch effects, and you'll just have to wait for this for a second. We get our spinning beach ball. Great, and it just popped out, right? And I like to keep these two right next to each other. This batch effects is now over here in the reels of our comp. Oh, I think it's in these reels. Look, regrain 175, and look, there's regrain 175. So it was named for this node, and if you double click on this bad boy, it's in the player. Now, this is the trick is it's not rendered yet, right? So we go one frame forward, and yep, we get the beach ball to see what it looks like. Because it's basically still rendering that whole comp, right? Okay, but this is really handy in our comp. Of course, we got beach balls everywhere because we've got this unrendered material in there. But we can unhook all this stuff from our comp and put just into our master keyer that one batch effect, right? And whenever we want, we can toss this baby away and rehook up our comp if we need to make adjustments back here. But this is going to really streamline doing all of our work next time on this nice key that we still have to do, right? So that's great. The only thing we need to do is go back to the timeline where this is sitting, right? And hit the render button. And of course, you all are going to go save your work when this is done. And this will get us all set up for doing a good key in the next class. This is Sam Edwards, FX PhD, FLM 213, Class 6. And I hope that was useful. And we'll see you on the forums and see you next time. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.